Baggins.
Oh.
Excitable little fellow, but fierce as a dragon in a pinch.
Hey there guys, Nordic Warrior here, welcome back to my video game review series. So, those of you who have been following my channel recently will know that I've been reviewing video games based on the Lord of the Rings, and today I'm going to be looking at The Hobbit. Released in 2003, developed by Sierra. This is of course based on the novel of the same name, written by J.R.R. Tolkien. So this game came out at a pretty interesting time. 2003 was of course when the final Lord of the Rings movie, The Return of the King, came out, and the overall popularity of this series was at its peak. This of course led to many video game tie-ins that came along around about that time to try and capitalise on the success of the movies. These games were pretty much all solid, and as far as licensed games go, they pretty much exceeded expectations. One game however that never really gets talked about anymore is this game, The Hobbit. The interesting thing about this game is that unlike most of the Lord of the Rings games around about that time, that were based on the movies, this game was entirely based on the Hobbit book. It actually bears some similarities to the Fellowship of the Ring game from the previous year, that was also based on the book rather than the movies. Being based on the book, the game has its own unique style and aesthetic, as well as having its own atmosphere, and it's a game that I have quite a lot of nostalgia for. So the game is a third-person action-adventure platformer where you play as Bilbo Baggins, the lovable hobbit from the Shire who gets roped into a quest by Gandalf the Grey to accompany Thorin Oakenshield and his dwarven companions to journey to the Lonely Mountain, defeat the dragon Smaug and take back their homeland. Along the way you will have to traverse many locations from the northern part of Middle-earth such as the Trollfells, the Misty Mountains, Mirkwood, the Woodland Realm, Lake Town and several others. Meet new characters and defeat enemies, culminating in a final battle to decide the fate of Erebor. The game actually follows the story of the book pretty well, with most of the important characters, story moments and events being conveyed nicely. In between levels you get some storybook style cutscenes narrated excellently by Tom Kane, as well as some pretty well made animated cutscenes. The gameplay is surprisingly varied. You start the game off in the Shire, which kind of acts as a tutorial for the game. You get to explore the Shire in sort of a sandbox format where you can traverse the area speaking to various NPCs and performing side activities for them, such as fetch quests or playing a game of hide and seek. You also get introduced into the platforming mechanics and familiarise yourself with the game's overall controls. Interestingly enough, the Shire was actually my favourite part of the game, because it felt like a genuine open world RPG. The game has plenty of variety in terms of its overall gameplay. You have some classic melee combat where you use Bilbo's walking stick to strike enemies, and later in the game you unlock his sword Sting.
Barely a pocket knife for a troll, but perfect for a hobbit. But you'll need a name. I know! Give you a name, and I shall call you Sting!
Which is significantly more effective in combat. Also, I like how Sting can be used as a torch to light up dark areas. That was really cool. In addition to the melee combat, you also have a ranged attack. Bilbo can collect rocks that can be thrown at enemies from a distance. This can be done in both a first-person targeting mode, as well as thrown straight from the hip. You can also find special magical power-ups for your ranged attacks that can be used temporarily at certain points in the game. For example, fire rocks, exploding rocks, and freeze rocks. These are few and far between however. As you play through the game you will unlock various upgrades for both your melee attacks and ranged attacks by finding ancient scrolls at specific points in the game, adding some much needed character progression. Speaking of upgrades, as you play through the game you can collect jewels that slowly fill up your meter. Once your meter is filled, you unlock an extra health bubble. This gives you an incentive to explore the levels as much as possible and to find as many of these jewels as you can. You can also obtain jewels by defeating enemies, giving you an incentive to defeat as many enemies as possible. Speaking of enemies, you have plenty of enemy variety in the game. You take on the likes of wolves, goblins and orcs of various kinds, stone giants, plants, spiders, and all manner of dangerous creatures throughout Middle-earth. You also have several boss battles in the game, such as specific goblins, a White Lord, 3 giant spiders, and several others. The game's combat can be surprisingly challenging in spots, so be sure to maintain your health and stock up on as many health potions as you can. You can also find silver coins scattered around the game, which can be spent at a shop in between levels to buy health potions, antidotes to poisons, as well as upgrades such as a larger medicine bag, or the ability to carry more ammo. I would advise investing in these. When you are not engaging in combat or speaking to NPCs, the majority of the game is spent platforming. There are numerous sections of the game where you will spend most of the time jumping, climbing, and trying not to fall to your death. Most of these are okay for the most part, but what I will say is that some of the platforming sections made me want to rage quit, and felt like they were deliberately made just to pad out the game. Seriously, you are going to need a lot of patience to get through some of these sections, but like I said before, for the most part they're okay, and if you persist you should be able to do them. If I can do them, anybody can, but I digress. The game also has plenty of puzzle solving sections, particularly in the later parts of the game. The puzzles are varied and very intellectually stimulating for the most part. I had fun with them. You also have a lot of stealth sections in the game, and the stealth mechanics are fantastic. For example, sneaking past the trolls is a lot of fun. Once you complete the level in the Misty Mountains, you then unlock the One Ring. This can be used to turn you invisible, which greatly assists you in these stealth sections. For example, you have a level where you have to sneak around the woodland realm, avoiding Thranduil's elven guards and finding a way to rescue the dwarfs. I had a blast with that level. Or the level where you first enter the Lonely Mountain and have to sneak past the dragon Smaug and avoid making too much noise. Those levels are extremely tense and are just fantastic. I also really enjoyed the more methodical, slow-paced level in Lake Town where you help Bard catch some thieves and have to do some investigating. That was a lot of fun. The game also has a lockpicking minigame. Throughout the game you will find lock chests where you have to use Bilbo's expert lockpicking skills to open them. These were usually easy enough, but they get quite a bit harder in the later stages of the game. The overall level design of the game is surprisingly good, and the graphics and presentation are solid for 2003. I particularly like the fact that they added several standout locations, such as the view you get coming out of a cave in the Trollfells, or climbing up a huge tree in Mirkwood towering above the forest. These standout locations for me just do their bit to add to the atmosphere, and are greatly appreciated. I do wish there had been more though. Another negative for me is that outside of the Shire, the RPG elements of the game feel a bit underdeveloped, and could have been so much more than what they were. I like that the game added some new characters that were made up just for the game, such as Lyanna the Elf, who you rescue early on and she becomes sort of a companion later. Or my personal favourite, Balfour the Dwarf.
Yes, but what about the guard? Once this gate is open, you won't have to worry about him anymore. Freedom! Time to play! Baruch Hazard!
Seriously, Balfour is a badass, and I kinda wished he was in the game a bit more. This could be because until the final battle, the rest of the dwarfs are worse than useless, and Bilbo has to do all the work himself. Some of the dialogue in the game is pretty funny, and I must admit the voice acting is excellent.
You have courage, little hobbit. You remind me of my boy, Gimli.
Bilbo is voiced by Michael Beatty, who does a great job as the character. The game also has a fantastic soundtrack, and it's one of those soundtracks that just suits the overall atmosphere of the game perfectly in my opinion. Sadly though, the game is far from perfect. It has a few things holding it back from being a masterpiece. As I mentioned before, the RPG elements leave a lot to be desired, and as for the platforming, like I said, there were several moments during these sections where I flat out just wanted to rage quit. I really do feel like a lot of these sections were simply made to pad out the game's runtime, despite the fact the game is long enough as it is. The game also has some pretty annoying difficulty spikes here and there, and as for the game's ending, it lacked a serious climax. I would have liked for there to have maybe been a big boss battle, You do have to defeat Bolg, but you don't actually fight him, you simply free Bayonne, and he does the work for you. Which is fine, but they still could have added a boss battle or a final challenge in my opinion. Nonetheless, the game is great in many ways, and it's certainly a game I would recommend to any Tolkien fan. As far as action-adventure games go, you could definitely do a lot worse, but you could also do better. It's a fun quest that is mostly faithful to the source material, and you can tell that the writers and developers had a genuine passion for the project. The game looks great, sounds great, and plays great, minus the annoying platforming sections here and there. I think the game is a lot of fun, and I give it a solid 7 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think. Stay tuned for more retrospective video game reviews. Once again, I have a lot of reviews coming to the channel in the near future. Thanks for watching, and God bless.